Welcome to this Buy or Buy Explainer, where today we are breaking down the spectacular highs and the incredibly frustrating lows of the most capable American electric SUV ever built, the 2022 to 2026 Rivian R1S. Right out of the gate, we've kind of got to acknowledge the elephant in the room. The R1S is essentially what happens when an American startup builds a Range Rover competitor that out-tows a Land Rover, out-accelerates a Porsche Cayenne Turbo, and then flat out tells you that you can't use Spotify properly because their proprietary infotainment is somehow more important than what the customer actually wants. We're going to break down every single known problem, all the insane specs, and the real-world reality of owning one. Let's get into it. We absolutely have to start with the sheer unapologetic ambition of the 2026 quad-motor model. This thing delivers an earth-shattering 1,025 horsepower from Rivian's new in-house designed permanent magnet synchronous motors. Paired with 1,198 pound-feet of torque, this powertrain is literally an engineering marvel. And what does that immense power actually do? Well, it launches this massive 3-row, 7-passenger family hauler from 0 to 60 in just 2.6 seconds. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. You are hauling the entire family to soccer practice with acceleration numbers that would genuinely embarrass a $1 million hypercar from a decade ago. But it isn't just some drag strip trick. It also pulls an incredible 7,700 pounds. That gives the R1S best-in-class towing capacity over literally every single luxury EV SUV on the market today. Well, with the sole exception of the massively heavy Cadillac Escalade IQ. Yet here is where we hit a classic case of American startup hubris. Rivian built this absolute monster of a machine, a genuine game changer, and then stubbornly decided their closed software ecosystem was more important than giving customers basic features like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It is a baffling choice for a luxury vehicle. So today, we're going to cover the ultimate electric SUV specs, pricing, and range, the massive leap from Gen 1 to Gen 2, known issues and recalls, and wrap up with our buy or buy verdict. Section 1. The ultimate electric SUV. Let's dive right into this off-road and luxury capability. The off-road credibility here, it's completely real. This is not just marketing fluff. We're talking 15 inches of adaptive air suspension ground clearance. It genuinely embarrasses gas-powered competitors. And you get to experience all of this dominance from a meticulously crafted interior dripping in gorgeous open-pore wood and their distinctive bare grass synthetic leather. The whole Adventure UI theme feels special in a way that Mercedes and BMW have honestly failed to match in their EV lineups. When you benchmark the R1S against the competition, it boasts vastly better build quality than a Tesla Model X. It completely destroys the Escalade IQ on the trails. Sure, a Lucid Gravity will give you much faster charging and maybe a slightly more luxurious cabin, but the Rivian holds its value far better than something like the Mercedes EQS SUV, which is just suffering from terrible depreciation. Section 2. Pricing, trims, and range. All of that staggering capability comes at a pretty steep price. Let's break down the massive lineup. It stretches from the $76,990 dual standard with 533 horsepower and 270 miles of range, up to a fully equipped dual at nearly $91,000, offering a 665 horsepower performance upgrade and 410 miles of range. From there, you step up to the tri-motor at roughly $109,000 with 850 horsepower, and finally, the blistering Quad Launch Edition at an eye-watering $125,990. Honestly, when you look closely at these numbers, you realize Rivian's pricing strategy is kind of hilarious. They're basically charging you $1,000 per horsepower until you reach 1,000, and then they just round up to make it cleaner. Fortunately, real-world Edmunds testing proves the range is totally legitimate. They returned an impressive 361 miles for the tri-motor, which is only 10 miles short of its EPA estimate, and they got 386 miles for the dual max performance, just 6% under its EPA rating. But there's a big catch here. The R1S consumes a massive 43.6 kilowatt hours per 100 miles in the tri-motor and 41.7 in the dual. That makes it the absolute least energy-efficient EV Edmunds has ever tested. And because it takes such a massive battery to push all that weight, charging speed is a notable weak point. The R1S peaks at a 220 kilowatt DC fast charge. That is well below the lightning-fast 350 kilowatt, 800-volt architectures you get from Hyundai, Kia, or Lucid. Though it is worth noting that 2026 models thankfully added the NACS Tesla supercharger integration right out of the factory. Section 3. Gen 1 versus Gen 2. If you're shopping the used market to save some cash, you absolutely must understand this next part. There is a critical, massive gulf between the two platforms. Gen 1 from 2022 to 2024 launched as a quad motor only with 835 horsepower and used their original electrical architecture and original software. But Gen 2 from 2025 onwards represents a complete vehicle overhaul from the ground up. We are talking a new electrical architecture with 60% fewer ECUs to simplify wiring, completely new in-house motors, retuned air suspension, and a massive software platform overhaul. Gen 2 is simply the better Rivian by every meaningful metric. It's honestly pretty clear that Rivian engineers just quietly spent the pandemic rebuilding their own car from scratch. They called the result Gen 2 instead of admitting out loud that Gen 1 was essentially a beta program funded by early adopters. You feel this difference most in the ride quality. Those heavy Gen 1 models were slammed by critics. Edmunds famously noted that the early R1S navigated rough roads with the refinement of a skateboard, crashing harshly over bumps. That rough ride contributed directly to below-average J.D. Power reliability scores. Section 4. Known issues and recalls. Let's talk about what breaks. Building a car from scratch is incredibly difficult. If you're buying a used Gen 1 beta vehicle, you must meticulously check the VIN for completed recall work. There was a software defect where the front could pop open at low speeds. There was a front passenger airbag failure to deploy recall. We saw rear lower control arm bolts with incorrect torque specs, loose seatbelt buckle anchors, and a Gen 1 tire pressure monitoring system recall. Do not skip checking the service records. Beyond recalls, early owners regularly battled dead 12-volt auxiliary batteries on 2022 and 2023 builds. And if you're out of warranty, that's going to run you anywhere from $800 to $1,400 to fix. You've also got inaccurate range estimators in cold weather, trim rattles on those early 2022 builds, charge port door misalignments, and Gen 1 infotainment slowness. And all of this is compounded by a brutally thin service network. Rivian only has about 60 service centers nationwide, mostly in major metros. Compare that to Tesla's 250 plus. Section 5, the buy or buy verdict. Time to make a call. So balancing the staggering capability against the high pricing and early production flaws, we have to match the verdict to the buyer. If you want to use Gen 1, say a 2022 Quad Adventure for around $50,000 to $65,000, only do it if you have documented recall completions in writing and you can accept a rougher ride. For used Gen 2, expect to pay $85,000 to $100,000 for a 2025 Tri. That is the best Rivian experience, but inventory is very limited. As for buying brand new, it is hard to justify dropping $90,000 to $126,000 without accepting massive startup company risk and that limited service network. Ultimately, the verdict for the channel is a solid maybe. Why? Because Rivian built the absolute most capable American electric SUV ever made, and Gen 2 fixed almost everything. But they still stubbornly refuse to support Apple CarPlay or Android Auto on any year, on any trim. They are basically charging you $90,000 and telling you that you cannot use Google Maps because their built-in navigation is supposedly better. Look, for buyers who actually use the off-road, the Rivian R1S, especially Gen 2, is genuinely the best electric SUV in production. But you have to ask yourself, is class-leading off-road dominance genuinely worth accepting a startup's growing pains, a thin service network, and a completely closed software ecosystem? You basically have to play entirely by Rivian's rules just to drive it. Think about what matters most for you and let us know what you'd choose in the comments below. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.